"What the hell are you doing to my son?" Nathan's voice thundered across the marble kitchen, his footsteps crashing like waves through Whitehall Estate. Jane froze, her arms still cradling the baby, wet and drowsy in the sink. Her yellow gloves dripped soapy water, trembling slightly, but it was too late. The child had stopped crying. For the first time in 8 months. Everything in the room went still. The air, the light, even the baby, now curled against her chest, eyes fluttering like petals in spring. Nathan's rage met silence, a silence he hadn't heard in his home since his wife died. Palm Beach, Florida. Whitehall Estate stood like a fortress carved out of marble and pride. Grand gates, winding drive, endless windows staring down like judgmental eyes. And somewhere deep inside, a billionaire breaking under the weight of a fatherhood he didn't understand. Nathan Coleman hadn't slept, not well, not since the funeral, and neither had his son. He paced outside the nursery like a ghost, designer shoes scuffing antique floors. Inside, his infant son screamed again and again and again. Nannies came. Nannies quit. Therapists gave advice that didn't work. He'd tried every bottle, every sound machine, every miracle Amazon promised. Nothing helped. And now the board was calling. Investors needed updates. Stockholders wanted projections. His father's company, his company, was cracking under the noise he couldn't silence in his own home. So when the agency sent a new girl, Jane Edmond, he barely looked at her, didn't read her resume, didn't ask her references. He just mumbled, "You start tomorrow," and walked away. Jane had been in many rich people's homes. She'd learned how to blend in, quiet, polite, invisible. But Whitehall felt different. It didn't just look empty. It felt empty. Like grief had taken up permanent residence. She met the baby. Blonde hair, swollen eyes, and a cry that sounded more like pain than tantrum. No one had told her his mother had died, but she could see it in the child's eyes, and in the way Nathan never held him. Each night, Jane would hum old songs while gently rubbing the baby's back. He'd scream for hours, then pass out from exhaustion. She'd watch his chest rise and fall and whisper, "I know, baby. I know it hurts." She wasn't supposed to get attached, but she already was. Nathan, meanwhile, buried himself in meetings, numbers, and silence. He didn't speak to Jane much, just nodded when she brought progress reports. She noticed how he never looked at the baby, how his hands shook when he walked past the nursery. She wondered what kind of man leaves his own son to scream through the night. But then, one morning, he stood outside the doorway longer than usual, listening, just listening. And now, here they were. Jane kneeling at the sink, gently bathing the child in warm water, humming something soft, an old lullaby from her childhood. The baby leaned into her chest, eyes closed, finally, at peace. And Nathan had just walked in. "What the hell are you doing to my son?" His voice ricocheted like a gunshot. Jane spun around, heart racing. He stopped crying," she whispered, voice cracking. Nathan stared at his son, at the still water, at Jane. The baby let out a soft sigh, wrapped his little fingers around Jane's wrist, and didn't make a sound, for the first time in 8 months. The house was quiet. If you've ever watched something so human that it made your chest tighten a little, don't scroll past without hitting that subscribe button. Stories like this one, they cost sleepless nights, full hearts, and a lot of tears. If you're here watching, don't just be a guest. Be part of this family. Subscribe, stick around, because what happens next will shock you. Nathan hadn't meant to yell, but the image burned into his mind. His maid, cradling his son in a kitchen sink, singing lullabies like she belonged there. It felt wrong, too intimate, too tender, too motherly. And that terrified him more than he could admit. Jane stood there, soaked, holding the baby who had just stopped crying. Her lips still parted mid-lullaby, unsure whether to run or explain. Nathan's jaw clenched. "You don't bathe my son in the kitchen sink like some rescue puppy. There's a bathroom. There's a routine. What is this? Jane lowered her eyes but didn't back away. He hasn't slept, Mr. Coleman, she said softly. He hasn't rested since... She passed. No routine has helped. Not the crib, not the nursery, not the bottles. Nothing. I thought maybe, just maybe, something human might. The words hung there. Something human. Nathan's fingers twitched at his sides. He looked down at his son, head nestled peacefully on Jane's chest, mouth slightly open, soft breathing like a tide rolling in, and for a moment the anger cracked, just a little. I hired you to clean, not play therapist, he muttered, turning sharply toward the door. That night, Nathan didn't sleep. Not because the baby cried, he didn't, but because Nathan stood in the hallway again, back pressed against the wall, listening to Jane hum through the baby monitor. Same melody, same softness, same peace. And something in his chest ached. He found himself wandering into the home theater at 2 a.m., flipping through security footage, the indoor cameras he barely remembered installing. There she was, Jane, holding the baby close in the nursery, pacing gently, whispering words the microphones couldn't quite catch, not rushing, not checking her phone, just being there. Nathan watched an hour go by. 2. And in every frame, the child looked calmer in Jane's arms than he had in Nathan's since the day they brought him home. The next morning, Jane arrived at 7 on sharp as always. She found the kitchen spotless and a post-it note on the counter. You can use the sink. N. She smiled, but said nothing. Over the next few days, the house began to change. The cries stopped. The baby giggled for the first time. He reached for Jane when she walked in. He slept, really slept, curled against her chest during mid-morning naps. Nathan noticed, quietly. He still didn't speak much, but he watched. From the hallway, from the second floor, sometimes from behind his office door. And once, just once, she caught him, watching her like he was seeing a ghost. Or maybe someone he used to know. But peace is fragile, especially when built on unspoken pain. And though the house grew quieter, the air between Nathan and Jane grew thick with questions neither of them dared ask. Until one day, Nathan said 5 words Jane never expected. Why does he trust you? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked down at the baby, gently holding her finger, and whispered, because I see him. What would you do if someone else could calm your child in ways you couldn't? Would you be grateful or feel threatened? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because from this point forward, the story gets deeper. Nathan Coleman didn't like feeling powerless, and that's exactly what Jane Edmond made him feel, without even trying. Every morning his son reached for her, not him. Every laugh, every nap, every peaceful hour was somehow tied to her. And deep down, Nathan hated that, because part of him needed it. But pride. Pride is louder than need, so instead of thanking her, he withdrew. He worked longer hours, ate dinners alone, avoided the nursery completely. He told himself it was professional distance, that he was letting her do her job. But the truth? He couldn't stand the reflection in Jane's quiet gaze, the way her kindness exposed his absence. Jane noticed the shift. The silence between them grew colder. No more notes, no more glances from the hallway, just avoidance. But what hurt more was the baby. He felt it too. He'd wake up reaching for Jane, calling softly through the monitor, only for Nathan to enter and try to soothe him. And every time the crying returned, louder, longer, as if his tiny heart already knew something no one was saying out loud. One evening, Jane stayed late, past her shift. The baby had a fever, nothing serious, but enough to keep her pacing with him in her arms, cool cloth pressed to his neck. Nathan walked in unannounced, loosened tie, phone in hand. You should have called me, he said, frowning. Jane looked up. You didn't answer the last 3 times I did. His jaw tightened. I was in meetings. I'm not always free to be a father," she interrupted gently. Nathan froze. Silence flooded the room like a rising tide. "I didn't mean," Jane started, realizing the line she'd crossed, but Nathan had already turned to leave. That night, she expected a termination email, but it didn't come. Instead, a simple message blinked on her phone. "Take tomorrow off. I'll handle it. N." Jane didn't sleep well. Not from guilt, but worry. Could Nathan really manage a full day alone with his son? Would the baby cry himself hoarse again? Would this fragile calm they'd built collapse? Meanwhile, Nathan stood in the nursery like a man preparing for battle. The baby blinked up at him as if to say, "Where's the one who understands me?" Nathan fed him, rocked him, played white noise on a speaker. But nothing worked. Nothing ever worked. By noon, both were exhausted. By 3 p.m., the child was screaming again, red-faced, sweating, inconsolable. And Nathan? He broke. He sat down on the floor, head in hands, whispering to himself, "I don't know how to do this." Just then, a soft knock on the door. Jane. She hadn't meant to come, but something in her spirit wouldn't let her stay away. Nathan looked up, eyes bloodshot. Without a word, he handed her the baby, and within minutes, silence. Jane didn't speak. She just held the baby, humming her melody again, the one she always used. And Nathan. He watched them from the corner of the room, his own child, and a woman who wasn't family, wasn't hired to love him but did anyway. 2 days later, the hurricane warning came in. Palm Beach was used to storms, but this one was different, stronger, angrier. The city declared a state of emergency. Roads clogged with evacuations, flights cancelled. Jane's apartment complex sent notices urging all residents to seek shelter elsewhere. She had nowhere to go, no family nearby, no friends with a spare room, just her beat-up sedan, and the mansion Whitehall estate. Nathan was on a call when she knocked on the office door. "Sorry," she said softly. "I know it's not protocol, but the storm... My place isn't safe." He looked up. She was soaked from the rain, holding a duffel bag, and a look that almost made him flinch. He nodded once. "You'll stay in the guest wing." And just like that, Jane Edmund was living under the same roof as Nathan Coleman. The storm hit hard that night. Glass rattled, power flickered, wind howled like something alive. But inside the estate there was warmth, candles, a fireplace, and a quiet baby asleep in Jane's arms. Nathan sat on the opposite couch, nursing a glass of bourbon. For once, the house didn't feel empty. "Why him?" Nathan asked suddenly. Jane looked up. "Sorry?" "My son. You've worked for a lot of families. Why care so much about him?" Jane hesitated, fingers brushing gently across the baby's tiny curls. "Because he reminds me of someone I couldn't save." Nathan sat forward, the firelight flickering in his eyes. "Your child?" Jane nodded once. "His name was Isaiah. He was 2. Leukemia took him fast. 1 minute he was laughing. Next minute, I was signing papers to release his body." The words hit like thunder, soft but devastating. "I didn't think I'd ever hold another baby again," she whispered. "But your son, he didn't just need me. I think I needed him too." Silence. Nathan looked at her differently now. Not like an employee, not like a stranger, but like someone carrying grief just as heavy as his own. "You should have told me," he said, voice low. "You never asked," Jane replied gently. The wind roared outside, rain lashed against the windows, but in that living room, something else was breaking, the distance between 2 people who'd been strangers in the same house. Nathan reached for a blanket and draped it over her shoulders. Their fingers brushed, a spark. Small, dangerous, but real. That night, neither of them slept in their own rooms. Jane stayed in the nursery, curled on the couch beside the crib. Nathan stayed just outside the door in the hallway, listening to her breathe, and the baby breathe. And for once, hearing peace in a house that had known nothing but loss. The storm cleared by morning. Palm trees bent like wounded soldiers along the Whitehall driveway. The sky was calm again, but the air between Nathan and Jane, it had changed. They were no longer just employer and maid. Something had cracked open during the storm, something neither of them could quite name. Nathan made breakfast. Not his chef, not his assistant. Nathan. Burnt toast, runny eggs, and a cup of black coffee that tasted like motor oil. Jane tried to hide her smile as she took a bite. "I didn't know billionaires cooked," she teased. "I don't," he replied. "Consider this. A hostile breakfast." Jane laughed. And Nathan actually smiled. It was the first real smile she'd seen on him. Later that day, she found a dusty photo frame on a side table near the grand piano. It was flipped down as if hidden. She picked it up. A beautiful woman full of life, holding a baby in one arm and tugging at Nathan's tie with the other. The woman's smile sparkled like sunlight. "You found her," Nathan's voice said from behind. Jane turned, frame still in hand. "I didn't mean to snoop," she whispered. "It's okay. You deserve to know." He walked over, took the frame gently, and sat on the couch. "She was my wife, Ava." Jane sat beside him. "She was the fire," Nathan said, eyes distant. "I was just the machine. She softened everything, even me. And then, the delivery was complicated. She never made it back home." He rubbed his face. "I buried her, and I haven't known how to be a father since." Jane swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't just lose her," Nathan continued. "I lost myself. The house, the money. None of it mattered. I didn't even want to see my son because all I saw was her. And the guilt," his voice broke. "It eats at you, because people like me aren't supposed to break. But I did." Jane reached out, placing her hand on his. "We all break, Nathan," she said gently. "But it's not weakness. It's just being human." Her words sank deep. And Nathan, he didn't pull away. That night, Jane sat in the nursery again. The baby slept soundly. Nathan stood by the door, watching both of them, the two people who somehow breathed life back into this hollow mansion. But then, something caught his eye. A small charm bracelet hanging from Jane's bag. Tiny initials were engraved on it. I.E. "Isaiah Edmund," Jane whispered when she saw him looking. Nathan blinked. His voice was low. He was real. She nodded. Every day. For a long moment, they didn't speak. But in that silence, everything changed, because now, they weren't just seeing each other, they were understanding each other. Some griefs are loud, others live in silence. But when two broken souls finally speak their truths, healing begins. If you're still watching this, it means this story means something to you. Subscribe, not just for stories, but for moments like this. Raw, human, real. It started with a smile. Jane had just changed the baby's onesie. He'd had one of those explosive messes babies are famous for, and she looked up to find Nathan watching from the hallway, laughing quietly behind his coffee. "You think that's funny?" she called out, mock offended. Nathan shrugged. "He never does that when I'm around. Guess he saves the worst for you." Jane smirked. "Because he knows I'll still love him after." Nathan's smile faded, gently. "I envy that," he said. Jane tilted her head. "What? Being loved like that, unconditionally?" She didn't answer right away, but her eyes softened. "You know, you're allowed to want that too," she said quietly. Nathan leaned against the doorframe, watching the baby coo and grab at Jane's necklace. "I don't think I've ever been loved without conditions," he murmured. "People see the money first, or the name, or the power. Never just me." Jane looked up. "And who is just you, Nathan?" He hesitated, and for the first time he looked unsure. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "But I think you're the only one who's ever asked." Later that afternoon, the power cut again. A tree had taken down the backup line. No Wi-Fi. no phones, no distractions. Nathan brought out an old photo album, something Jane figured had been collecting dust for years. They sat at the long dining table by candlelight, flipping through faded memories. Ava as a child, Nathan in college, the day the company went public, their wedding. Jane smiled. "You look different when you laugh." He glanced at the photo. "I was lighter then," he said. "Before I thought love was permanent." Her eyes didn't leave his. "It still can be," she whispered. Their hands brushed on the table, and this time neither pulled away. The baby stirred around 9 p.m. Jane started to rise, but Nathan gently touched her arm. "I'll go," he said. She looked surprised. "You sure?" He nodded. "Teach me." Together they stood over the crib. Jane guided him, how to scoop his son up gently, how to sway, how to whisper that hum she always used. And for the first time, the baby relaxed in Nathan's arms. Nathan looked at her, eyes glassy. "I didn't know I could do this." Jane's smile was quiet. "You just needed to believe you could." Later, they sat by the fireplace again. Jane with tea, Nathan with a glass of wine. This time, the silence between them was soft, easy. "Tell me something no one knows about you," he asked. Jane thought for a moment. "I used to want to be a singer. I even made it to the semi-finals of a local talent show once." He raised an eyebrow. "Really?" She nodded, laughing. "But then life happened, and diapers paid better than dreams." Nathan chuckled. "Sing something." "No way." "Please," Jane blushed. "Only if you promise not to fall in love with me." Nathan stared at her. Too long, too deep, and whispered, "Too late." The next morning was too quiet. The baby had slept through the night. For the first time, Nathan had put him down alone. And Jane. She stood just outside the nursery, watching through the half-open door, arms crossed over her chest, torn between joy and something heavier. Distance, not from the baby, from Nathan. Over the past few days, they'd grown close. Too close, maybe. The smiles, the touches, the near confessions. But this wasn't a love story yet. Not when Nathan was still a billionaire, and she was still the maid. And now, after everything, Jane felt that wall returning. It hit her hardest when she overheard the phone call. She was walking past Nathan's office, quietly, out of habit, and paused at the door when she heard her name. "Yes, Jane's been managing the baby just fine. No, I haven't fired her yet. I know what it looks like, but don't start. I'm not... Jesus, I'm not falling for the maid, okay? That's not who I am." Jane's heart dropped. Her fingers gripped the frame of the door. "It's just been convenient," Nathan said. "The house is calmer, that's all. Don't make this more than it is." A long pause. Then laughter. His friends, probably. And Nathan joined in. Jane stepped back. The walls of Whitehall felt colder than ever. It wasn't the words, it was the tone. Detached, dismissive. Like she was a phase, a function. Not a woman who had held his son through nightmares, not someone who had bared her past in candlelight, not someone he had whispered too late to just 2 nights ago. That afternoon she didn't hum to the baby. She fed him, changed him, rocked him in silence. Nathan noticed, but didn't ask. Not until dinner, when Jane placed the baby monitor on the counter, grabbed her bag and walked toward the door. "You're leaving early?" he asked, confused. "I've done what I came here to do," she said, barely looking at him. Nathan stood. "Jane," she turned, eyes wet, voice low. "You said I was convenient." The words hung there heavy and sharp. He opened his mouth to explain, but she held up a hand. "Don't. I heard everything. You said you weren't falling for the maid, and maybe you're not. But I am a woman, Nathan, and I deserve better than to be someone's convenience." The baby cried softly in the monitor behind them. Nathan looked at it, then at her, and for the first time since they met, he had no words. Jane nodded once and walked out. That night, the house was loud again, not with crying, with absence. The kind of absence that echoes in the walls, that no money can silence. Nathan sat alone in the nursery, holding his son, eyes fixed on the door Jane always came through. The nursery was quiet again, but this time it wasn't peace. It was something else, something lonelier. Nathan sat on the edge of the rocking chair, his son asleep in his arms, finally, and his thoughts anything but restful. It had been 2 days since Jane left. 2 days of silence in a house that used to breathe when she was in it. 2 days of going through the motions, bottle, bath, bedtime, but none of it felt right. The baby hadn't smiled. Neither had Nathan. Her absence wasn't loud, it was echoing, in the way the baby looked at the door every time it opened, in the empty chair by the crib, in the cold sink where she used to hum lullabies. Nathan scrolled through his phone more times than he could count. Her number was saved. Her name was there, Jane Edmund, but his thumb hovered over the screen, always stopping just short of calling. What would he say? "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it." Or worse, "I didn't realize how much you mattered until you were gone." He replayed that call in his head again and again, the way he'd laughed, the way he'd denied her, the way he'd reduced her to just another role in his life when she'd been the only real thing in it. And now, she was gone. Across town, Jane sat at her cousin's apartment, folding borrowed baby clothes. She hadn't touched her bag since the day she left Whitehall. But today, something drew her to it. Inside was the bracelet, Isaiah's, and beside it she found something else, a folded scrap of paper she didn't remember putting there. It was Nathan's handwriting. "Thank you for giving my son peace, and for showing me what it means to be present. N." Her breath caught. Had he meant it? Or was it just one of those thank yous you write when you think kindness has an expiration date? Still, her fingers lingered on the paper. And in that moment, she asked herself the question she hadn't dared face. Do I believe he could love me? Not just need me? Back at the estate, Nathan finally made the call. Voicemail. He took a deep breath. "Jane, I messed up. You were never convenient. You were the reason this house finally felt alive again. My son slept because of you. I breathed because of you." He paused. "I didn't fall for the maid. I fell for the woman who saw me when I couldn't even look at myself. And if you'll let me, I want to be the kind of man who deserves that." Click. No backup plan. No strategy. Just a voice. And hope. It was just after sunset when Jane stood at the edge of Whitehall's long driveway again. She hadn't called ahead. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but something in her chest, maybe hope, maybe heartbreak, pulled her back. The mansion looked the same. Cold marble, tall windows, that heavy stillness in the air. Except now. She knew where the warmth lived. She took a breath and walked up the steps. Nathan was in the kitchen, standing over the sink, the same one where it all began. The baby was strapped to his chest in a soft sling, asleep. His little hands curled into fists. Peaceful. And Nathan. He was humming, the same melody Jane used to sing. He turned around when he heard the door. And froze. There she was, hair pulled back, same soft eyes, but different, stronger, like a woman who knew her worth and knew what it cost to protect it. "I didn't come back for the job," Jane said softly. "I know. I didn't come back to save your son either." Nathan nodded. "Then why did you come?" he asked, voice barely louder than the hum of the fridge. Jane took a step forward. "Because somewhere between lullabies and late-night talks, I fell in love with both of you, and I didn't want that to end because of your fear." Nathan's eyes welled. He unbuckled the baby sling and gently laid his son in the bassinet beside them. Then he stepped toward her. "I was scared," he admitted. "Not of you, of how much you made me feel again." He reached for her hand, gently, slowly, giving her the choice. "I don't want convenient," he whispered. "I want real. I want you. Here. With us. If you still believe I can be that man." Jane stared at his hand, and then into his eyes. "You already are." She placed her hand in his, and for the first time since they met, it didn't feel like crossing a line. It felt like coming home. Later that night the baby stirred, a soft cry, a restless sigh. Jane moved to rise, but Nathan touched her arm. "I've got him," he said. She watched from the doorway as he picked up his son, held him close, and whispered the same melody she once sang alone. Now, it belonged to them, all three of them. In that moment, Whitehall Estate didn't feel like marble and silence anymore. It felt like family. It felt like love. Unexpected, but earned. Do you believe true love can survive even after being tested this hard? If you made it to this moment, if you felt anything watching this unfold, please subscribe. Not just for the stories, but because somewhere in every heartbreak, every healing, and every second chance, there's a part of you here too,